I have today on the bench a Rotel RCC 940AX compact disc player. So let's just see what's going on with this fine piece of equipment. We'll power it up. That doesn't sound good. Let's crack it open and see what's going on under the hood. A couple screws in the back, a couple screws on the side should open this up. We have a clue here. We can hear a motor running. So we may have a broken belt or a slipping belt. Let's see. Oh, there's a screw here that's missing. So right off the bat, that tells me somebody's been into this thing. So the screws out of it, the top just should lift off. Like that, to reveal a turntable style 5-disc changer. And we can hear a motor running. And the turntable spins freely. Let's see if we can open this thing with the open button. Okay, nothing's opening, so we have to take the mechanism apart. If we lift the disc clamp screw here and remove the disc clamp, we should be able to remove the tray. I believe once we have the mechanism down, if we push on this lever over here, that will allow the tray to slide out. And we can see that there is a belt in here, and the belt is really loose, and we can see it through here. If you look down through this hole, you can see the pulley, and you can see the belt that is really sloppy. So I think what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take out these screws, actually these screws on the bottom here, so I can take the bezel off, and then I can slide the faceplate off, and from there I should be able to remove one of the rails that will allow me to lift out at least part of the mechanism so that I can access the loading motor. This doesn't appear to be one of the real nice, easy ones. So we take that off. That metal bezel will come off. We'll set that aside. Now, I should be able to take out these screws here and one more on the top and lift the front faceplate off. That way I should be able to free up the rail and lift out the mechanism where I can access the loading belt and change it. And I'm hoping that I'm going to have a belt here that will be the right size. I have a few belts kicking around here from years gone past, so I won't know until I actually get this one out of here whether it's going to be the correct one or not, but we'll try. So we release the one more screw. There's one more screw on this side over here, right down here, that I have to take out to release the front control panel. And then I have to take out probably may be able to just release the screws on the side of this bracket so that I can tip this up enough that I can get underneath here. So I'm going to release these two screws here and these two screws here. And now I should be able to take that off, and I should be able to get enough clearance that I can get in here and slip this belt off. I may have to take out these brackets. I'm going to take out the screw on either side here so I can swing this bracket out of the way, so I can just have a little more clearance. So lift this bracket out of the way. Now I should be able to lift the disc tray up enough that I can slip the old worn belt out, and we'll see if I can find one that will fit. So I have an old SBM 4.0, which is a little bit smaller because this other one's badly stretched. Let's see if we can get this one in here. And make this thing work. So we'll throw the belt around here. I think you guys can see what I'm doing. We'll just throw the belt around the pulley and put it around the motor. Oops. That should work. Drop that back in place like that. And then we can put the side piece back on. So that's got the bracket back in place to hold the disc tray. Now we need to put the support piece back in place. So put your disc tray back in place before putting on the bracket. I just spotted something. I've never worked on one of these units before, and that's why I took the disc tray out, but you can actually access through slots. Well, you can't access on if the mechanism is up, you have to take the disc tray out to lower the mechanism from the other side. But to open and close the actual tray, you can get in here with a screwdriver and actually turn this gear manually here to open the tray and close the tray without taking off the actual disc tray itself. But if you need to lower down the CD assembly, you actually have to take the disc tray out so that you can get at the access point over here and turn the other gear, which drops down the tray, or drops down the optical pickup assembly. Well, we find that the disc tray opens and closes slowly. But you know what? We have another belt on the other side that's also, I think, worn or broken. So we gotta look on the other side of this thing because the other belt is on the other side. So let's take a look at it again. So we're on to the left side now, and again I have to do exactly the same thing. I have to get at the motor. It's underneath here on this side for this portion of the mechanism. So it's got to take apart. Actually, I might even be able to lift the whole assembly out. I don't know if I can get at the motor or not on this thing. I probably do have to separate the tray. So now I have to remove the entire mechanism, which means removing these brackets from the back so that I can actually take the whole mechanism out. So I'll remove both the left and the right side slide brackets, and now I should be able to lift the whole mechanism out, which I can, to access. As you can see, I have to take this apart. Here's the belt here that's shot, and I have to actually take this assembly apart to get at it. As you can see, here's the belt I just changed, but we also have to change this other little one down here, which is a little more of a challenge to get at. At least the wires are relatively long, so I can work on this thing. Just set it like that. Then I can work on it and change that belt. So to change the belt, I'm going to remove these larger screws here. There should be about 4 of them, or 5 maybe. And this should release the whole assembly, including the motor. Removing those screws, I should be able to remove this assembly here, which I can. Okay, there we go. Now the belt comes off, and as you can see, the belt is literally melted. Now I gotta try and find one that will replace that one. So slip a belt over the pulley here. Again, this is another one that's a little bit on the small side, but it's all that I have, so we'll just slip that around there. and drop the assembly in place. I'll start a couple screws down here, and then I can see if I can stretch the belt over top of the motor shaft. The problem with belts these days is, well, they're all starting to wear out, but they used to be a dime a dozen, and you could get these things just about anywhere that sold electronic supplies. But the problem that's happened in recent years is that the demand for belts is almost non-existent now, because everybody's tossing out their electronics. They're not repairing them. So the suppliers at one time that had endless supply of belts, now their stocks are dwindling. Those that still can supply belts are charging an absolute fortune for them. So I'm getting a very short supply on belts. I used to have a lot in stock. Now I'm down to my last few, and even some of the ones I'm using are recycled, where I pull them out of units that are scrap, just to keep the belts out of them, right? Old tape decks and stuff that are going to the dump because they've got another major failure like a motor. I'll keep the belts if they're any good, because I could reuse them. And one of these belts is just that. It is a recycled belt. The other one's a brand new one. Okay, let's try and pull the belt over the pulley now and see if this thing will work. I guess you guys couldn't see that, but it does raise and lower. And there's good tension on here now. So let's flip the mechanism back over and see if we can make it work. So once again, disc table in place. And replace the bracket. Our disc tray now rotates. This unit does use an optical sensor. That's it there. It determines what disc it's set up to play by reading these slots that are encoded into the side of the disc turntable. So as this rotates, it counts the pulses. So if this is not reading the pulses correctly, it won't lock in to the correct disc location and play it. So I have to check out both this sensor. There's also a little wheel here that locks into place, and that actually, feeling that, I think that might be gummed up a bit. That might be part of the problem, is that the lubricant on here is dried out. So let's just check that out. So once again, we have to take the side pieces out, so I can lift out the mechanism one more time so that I can flip it over and we can check out the little lever down here. This little lever is right down here, and it is spring loaded. You can see it right here. So I'm just going to take that off and put some lubricant on the post, the pivot, because it is kind of gummed up. So that's accessed through here. Grease that's on there feels to be very high viscosity, almost like a silicone type grease. I'm just going to check it. It might be the grease is dried out, but it might be that high viscosity silicone type grease that was used like for dampening tone arms, because they don't want it quickly snapping into place. So it may be that operation is normal, but I'm going to take a closer look at it. Okay, now we can see, after cleaning up the dried up grease, the disc, I guess what that does is it rides on the inside of the turntable here, and it locks in to lock each of the disc positions in place. So now I've re-lubricated that, took the dried grease off, So that's operating properly. Now we'll put the turntable back in and test it out. Just from the way this unit's behaving, I still feel that that sensor is not being read, and we'll put the scope on there in a minute, but listen what's going on. And it stops before it gets to position. So I have a feeling that that sensor may have failed and it's not being read. Let's get the scope in there and see what the signal coming out of it looks like. So how we test an optical sensor is, you have to understand how an optical sensor works. The optical sensor has an LED and a phototransistor, and normally the LED light is shining across the gap to hit the phototransistor. Okay, we look down at the sensor, we can clearly see which side is the LED, and it tells us which ones are sense, our 5 volt, and our LED. So our sense is the gray wire over here. We have 5 volts supplied down the middle here, and we have our LED return. The sense is going to be the line that detects the breaking of the light beam through here. So let's clip our scope onto the sense line and look to see whether this thing's actually working. But of course, it's really easy to detect whether our sensor is working or not. All we need to do is apply something between the sensor and the light source. So if I make and break with a piece of tape, we'll see the voltage will drop down from 5 volts, because right now the transistor is in full conduction because the LED is shining across the sensor gap, and it's causing the transistor to come into full conduction, which will give us 5 volts. So if I break the beam, it should drop to 0, which it does. And this is how it signals. As it rotates, it pulses out the disc position. So the sensor is working. So I have the table back in, and I've got my scope clipped to the sense line down here. I clipped onto the wire. It's still got a problem. When it rotates, it doesn't stop where it's supposed to, but it's obviously a problem down here on the board, because watch when I rotate the table by hand, you'll actually see it pulsing out as the table rotates. I was just checking some voltages, and my voltages are there, and it actually loaded the disc chuck. I'm curious to see whether we have any sound, because I put a disc in and it loaded. Well, when you know this thing's playing, weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. All I did was I took it apart and I put it back together, and it started behaving a little differently. Now when I push disc select, but you see it's still stopping prematurely. If I move it by hand, now it's going to act up again. That's weird. That is really, really strange. Now I've got my error again, like it's not reading the disc. It'll go scan all the discs. I want to play disc 4. It'll stop prematurely, but if I move it into place, press play, it will play it. Weird. We're making progress, but this one's kind of odd. It's a really odd situation. It's reading my sensor and the player is playing, but the motor is stopping prematurely when it's turning the disc table around. If I stop it, I can press open. It'll open like it's going to allow me to change discs. If I stop it, This one you're able to turn it by hand because it is free. If I want to play, I press play, it'll turn around, but it stops prematurely. If I just, you'll see it'll stop prematurely again. It's going to stop a little bit soon. But if I turn it like that, it'll play. I'm wondering whether perhaps the belt that I used for the, I'm thinking maybe perhaps the belt that I used for the disc tray is possibly a little bit too tight, and it's not turning it as fast as it normally would, and because it's not turning it as fast, when it reads the disc code for which position it's in, it's stopping prematurely, whereas if it was going faster, by the time the motor stops, it would have kicked into place. I'm wondering if that's my problem. Interesting, because I didn't have the exact size of belt. I put one in that was a little bit smaller than the original, and I wonder whether that was the problem. Let's see if I can find a bit bigger belt, and we'll try that, because everything else seems to be working on this thing, other than it's not chucking the disc at the right position. Curious, huh? Okay, let's see if I can find a little bit larger belt. So I drove into the big city and I got a more appropriately sized belt. Hopefully this is the right size for this thing, because the one I put on there I think was just a little bit too tight. So I've taken the mechanism apart one more time here so that I can place the new belt in here and try and thread it around this pulley. A little bit, I think that's just going to be right. Hopefully that's the right size. In some devices you can get away with putting in a tighter belt and it's not an issue, but other times if the tension is too high, it can slow down or load down the mechanism. Drop the mechanism back in place and try and line it up with our slide plate, which is now lined up. And now we can put the sides back on this thing. I'm getting good at removing this mechanism. The first time I took it apart, I didn't really have a clue of how to get this thing apart because I've never taken one of these apart before, but after opening and closing this thing as many times as I have during the servicing, I've gotten actually quite good at knowing what to take apart and what not to. For example, I took off the front bezel here initially, I think. Yeah, I took the front bezel off here. I didn't have to. There was enough room that I could just, and even not having to take off the front faceplate, and just loosen the screws on the side, or take the screws out on the side and take out this one on either side here and just leave it attached to the bracket, and it gives me enough clearance that I can work on it. And of course, anybody who has access to the service manual will already know this, but since I don't have a service manual for this thing kicking around, it's kind of figure out what you're doing while you're working on it. Okay, I've now remounted the front panel on here. Let's try this thing out and see whether it's going to work. I'll turn on the power and we'll hit the open button here. opens. We'll just put a disc in and press play. Now where are we here? Close. We got to select disc number 3. And disc number 3. Disc 3. Go to 3, please. Or is it 4? Oh, maybe it's 4. Yeah, it's disc number 4. There we go. That's what it's supposed to do. There we go. So, that's how to change the belts the hard way on a Rotel CD player. It's a RCC 940AX. I changed both belts in here. The belt for the real, or the turntable is a critical size if you go too small, which I did initially because I figured that I could probably get by with recycling a couple belts from a scrap machine, and it was a little bit smaller, not much, but it was enough smaller that it was dragging this thing down, and what would happen is when it was rotating it would stop early. Well, you saw, and that's what I suspected was the cause of it not rotating into place, was the belt was a little too tight and it was stalling the motor out. So I went and got the right size one, and as you can see, it's fixed the problem. So of course now we just have to place these pieces on the back again here. These are keyed, so there's 2 little tabs on the bottom and 1 on the top. That's so that you can only put them in one direction because they have to line up with the holes on the back here. So these just drop into place, snap into place, and they're held in place by 1 screw. So we'll snap those in, do a final test on it here now that it's, oh, there we go. Set my power button there, open the disc tray up. One of the things I like about these ones here is when they're in the open position, you can just freely rotate the disc tray. Some of the players you actually had to press a button to advance. Like the Sonys, for example, you had to press a button to advance the disc tray. At Rotel, they disengage the drive gear so that this thing floats freely, so you can turn it around. And then when you want to play it, I put this into disc number, I guess that's disc number 2. So I close it down, and if I press play, it should search through all the discs. Play. There we go. If I open it, the tray is locked, so I can only change these 2 discs. Unlike the Sonys, which had the play exchange, which would let you do all 4 of them, this one you can only change 2 of them. If I stop it, and then open it, I start out at, say, the disc 5 position here. If I want to play disc number 5, if I hit the open close button and I hit disc number 5 down here, it should go to disc number 5 automatically. And then play. Where's play? Disc 5. Play. There we go. Here's disc number 5. There we go. It's fixed. I can now get the top back on this machine and get this unit back to its happy owner.